Welcome to our webinar for special education. I'm Dave Clark. I'm with Reading Horizons, and I'm glad you've joined us today. Now, due to popular demand, the webinar title was changed. Today, we'll be focusing on a case study where 50% of special education students moved to general education, and the three keys that made it happen. Those three keys are explicit phonics instruction, systematic lessons, and lessons that are properly sequenced. We'll also talk about research-based tools for reading improvement. Our presenters will be first, there's Stacy Hurst, who is the curriculum director here at Reading Horizons. Stacy has been an educator for over 15 years before coming to Reading Horizons. And she has been an ELL teacher, literacy coach, and reading specialist. And as in her capacity as a reading specialist, she worked with special education students, and she'll be talking about her experience here in just a few minutes, which is quite remarkable. Next, we'll hear from Laura Axtell. Laura has master's degrees in special education and counseling. She's also worked as an educator extensively, and Laura has a lot of insightful information for you. Next, we'll hear from Barb Mackey. Barb is a Reading Horizons user and special education instructor in Missouri for over 20 years. So now we will go to our first presenter, Stacy.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm happy to talk about this. So I have been working full-time at Reading Horizons about 8 or 9 years now, but before that I did work in a school. I became associated with Reading Horizons because we used it in our school throughout. So I would just like to share with you today an experience we had. It continues to impact what we do and of course what works best for students. We had really great teachers at my school and very supportive administrators. So we had that working in our favor, but we had the challenges that I think most elementary schools had. And most of it was a big disconnect between Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. At the time, we were barely calling them Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3. It was general ed and special ed. The instruction wasn't sticking. I would have teachers tell me, I don't know what they're doing when they're taking my kids, but the special ed teacher would say they're making so much progress, and the classroom teacher would say we're not seeing that here. And so it wasn't sticking and it wasn't transferring. And because the type of instruction differed. And I think in 2019, it's safe to say that most of us understand that if you're taking those students who are struggling the most from one type of instruction and then putting them in another and expecting them to meld the two, that would be the demographic that would be least likely to do that without a whole lot of support. So we did have that happening. Communication between the teachers, the general classroom teachers and the special education classroom teachers, there wasn't really a space for that. So there was a lot of disconnect. We tried a few different things initially. We had an educator who was so smart. She wrote a grant that allowed us collaboration time. So as the reading specialist at that point, I got to meet with each of the teachers once a week, and our special educators also got to meet with the teachers. So that was helpful. That really helped raise awareness, because at that point we started focusing on student data. And the issue, though, the big issue at that time was that we weren't using the same type of instruction in Tier 1 and 2. So we added Reading Horizons instruction initially in Tier 2, and frankly, that's because it caught on better there. The teachers had the option to use it in Tier 1, and some were, and that was working well. We also determined through the collaboration effort that we needed to set common goals. So we set as our litmus that we would watch the number of referrals to special education. That would be our indicator that what we had going on systemically would be working. So we kept that in mind. And again, as we tried, there were a lot of stories I could tell you in between, but we landed on really insisting that our Reading Horizons instruction, structured literacy, as Laura just talked about, was instituted in tiers 1, 2, and we did use it in tier 3 as well. And that one thing probably made the biggest difference, in addition to the fact that we had a space for collaboration. we were able to really use that as commonly as we could. So students going from one setting to another, we had pull out at the time, weren't getting drastically different instruction with a totally different program. And we were able to coordinate what was happening in the general ed classroom with what was happening in intervention. Now, initially, I should mention that when we started using Reading Horizons, mostly in Tier 2, our Tier 2 students, our intervention and special education students actually started, it kind of opened a revolving door because they were outpacing students in the general ed classroom. And so students would go back and forth based on need. But once we instituted in all 3 tiers, we did not see that as much. So at year 3, and again, we were still all looking at the same amount of data, the same data. So year 3, we did an analysis. We said, how close are we to our goal of reducing referrals to special education? And at year 3, we had reduced them significantly. I actually don't remember the percentage. All I remember, as we do in human nature, is the disappointment I felt because it wasn't as high of a number. The number we reduced them by were not as high as we wanted. It was not as high as we wanted it to be, but it was still high. It was still significant, I should say. What we weren't accounting for at the time was that we had a lot of students moving in and out of our school. So at year 5, we had the wherewithal to just look at the data and consider students who had received Reading Horizons instruction 2 years in a row. And of course, these are, we're looking at referrals to special education. When we accounted for that, it was about 50% that we had reduced referrals by. So we felt that was significant. Again, collaboration was key. But the key factor, we felt like if we had to choose one thing that made all the difference, it was the fact that we were using effective structured literacy instruction in tiers 1, 2, and 3. So that was a common language. Students were able to speak it, throughout the school, their school day. It gave us a common language in the school, and it just really helped focus our attention. And again, I mentioned we had awesome teachers and administrators, so we always asked the question, what's best for the student? And we definitely determined that was. And as you all know, because we're teachers, it also increased teacher knowledge, which ended up making a huge difference in the lives of those students. And if we did an entire webinar just on the things that we saw anecdotally and qualitatively in our students, I could do that. Probably not without crying, but I could do that because it really made a big difference in their literate lives. I just want to share with you before we move on to the next thing as well. Yesterday, I was at a conference where some teachers who have been using Reading Horizons were sharing their data and their experiences as well. And one school, they had implemented Reading Horizons instruction in tiers 1 and 2. Actually, yeah, I should back up a little bit. I don't know about tier 2, frankly. But as we say, the best tier 2 intervention is tier 1, effective tier 1 instruction. And this school definitely demonstrated that. So as they implemented tier 1 instruction with Reading Horizons, their scores climbed and climbed, but they got to the point where in 4th grade, they had 0 4th graders in intervention. And I think that is amazing. And as special educators, think of all the resources, your resources, time specifically, that frees up for those special educators to really focus on those students who do have IEPs and need significant support and instruction. So I thought that was fantastic. I like I mentioned, I've been at Reading Horizons now for 8 or 9 years full time. I continue to work with teachers in schools, and we see the similar things as they implement this quality instruction. It's most effective in all 3 tiers for sure, but we see that it makes a difference no matter what. In fact, I guess I could even mention that that is why I work at Reading Horizons. I actually never intended on leaving that instructional setting, but my commitment to you as an educator and as the curriculum director is that we will continue to work hard through our training, what we offer through training and through our products, to bridge that gap between special education and the general ed classroom and reduce the number of referrals to special education to those who really qualify and need it. So we're not suffering from dysteachia, but if it's dyslexia or whatever the learning disability is, that we can free up our resources for the professionals who are trained to focus on that. So we will continue to do that. As ever, we like to hear from you. But if you have any suggestions, any feedback, feel free to email us at curriculum@readinghorizons.com and give us some suggestions.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm Laura Axtell, and we're going to focus now on the research, the keys to effective reading intervention. Let's start by taking a look at the purpose of special education. The stated purpose of the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, includes the following: to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living, and to assess and ensure the effectiveness of efforts to educate children with disabilities. In an amendment to IDEA through the Every Student Succeeds Act in December 2015, Congress stated that disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the rights of individuals to participate in or contribute to society. Improving educational results for children with disabilities is an essential element of our national policy of ensuring equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. Special education for children with specific learning disabilities and reading, then, means that they are supposed to receive specialized instruction and effective intervention provided by trained educators that will improve their educational results. In other words, these children, most of whom have average or above average intelligence, are supposed to be receiving an education that will help them get better at reading. As Stacy mentioned, and as we'll discuss today, when they receive this type of special education, these children improve. When they don't, they won't. Today's webinar will address the issue of reading disabilities within special education. When we discuss reading, we must naturally include research on dyslexia. Information from the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity identifies the scope of this issue. Dyslexia affects 20%, 1/5 of the population, and represents 80 to 90% of all those with learning disabilities. And we know that learning disabilities are by far the largest category for classification within special ed. Dyslexia is the most common of all neurocognitive disorders. This graphic, based on the work of Dr. Sally Shaywitz, provides a better understanding of the reading brain. Effective readers have 3 main areas of the brain activated for language and print, and neural pathways that connect these various activities. Remember that dyslexia is neurocognitive, so a person with dyslexia generally does not have the same level of activation in all of the language centers and therefore doesn't have adequate neural pathways for reading. A very recent meta-analysis published in Exceptional Children by Dr. Doug Fuchs and colleagues yielded important information for those working in the field of special education. Their study revealed that students classified with learning disabilities performed approximately 4 years below students without disabilities in reading. 4 years. Further, even when students with disabilities are provided with supplemental services and instruction, reading instruction for students with disabilities may not include the instructional practices that researchers have identified as effective for improving these students' reading abilities. In fact, Lindstrom reports regarding reading instruction for students with or at risk for disabilities that effective instructional strategies are rarely used. Teachers spend less time on literacy instruction than other classroom activities, and instruction often does not address foundational reading skills. Students with disabilities' access to the curriculum is unlikely to change if teachers do not know how to improve students with disabilities outcomes or choose not to use evidence-based practices. What are these evidence-based practices? We'll begin with the 5 components identified by the National Reading Panel report in 2000. The goal of reading is, and has always been, comprehension, the ability to gain meaning from what we read. And as you can see, it is the top of the pyramid. It turns out that several important factors, however, must be adequately in place to allow for this higher level reading skill. The base of the pyramid contains the foundational skills that allow for accurate and fluent reading. Decades of reading research have confirmed that phonemic awareness is far more important to reading than previously known. And phonemic awareness is the ability to identify and manipulate individual sounds, phonemes, in spoken words. We know from research that a student's skill in phonological awareness is a good predictor of later reading success or difficulty. Next, the introduction to the relationship between sounds and letters, known as phonics, allows the ability to accurately decode and encode words in print. The other components that contribute to comprehension include fluency and vocabulary. The reading panel also specifically identified the 3 keys to effective reading: explicit instruction, systematic instruction that is planned and organized, and sequential and cumulative instruction that moves from simple to more complex. More recently, Dr. David Kilpatrick, in his 2015 book on reading difficulties, identified the elements of successful reading intervention programs. The interventions that have shown effectiveness with struggling readers shared 3 elements. First, supporting the findings of the National Reading Panel, intervention must correct the student's phonological difficulties and teach phonemic awareness to the advanced level. Next, effective intervention must provide phonic decoding instruction and reinforcement. And a third element of intervention is the ample opportunities for students to connect developing skills to reading in connected text. One other valuable contribution to our understanding of reading instruction and intervention comes from Scarborough's reading rope. First, reading is a multifaceted skill that is gradually developed over years of instruction and practice. Reading does not happen overnight, but is developed in stages. Next, the foundational word recognition skills must come first. Again, phonological awareness, decoding and spelling, and sight recognition. And these skills must be automatic so that there are sufficient cognitive resources to address the higher order skills leading to comprehension. The concept of reducing the cognitive load while learning to read is critical. When students don't have solid word recognition skills, there's far too much being asked of them cognitively to be able to attend to all of the components of reading comprehension. Skilled reading combines fluent execution and coordination of word recognition and text comprehension, again, over time. It's also important to talk about the issue of older students who are struggling readers. Once struggling readers get beyond elementary school, they have a much lower probability of receiving the kind of intervention that will allow them to catch up. As we mentioned previously, students with reading disabilities may be as far as 4 years behind their peers in reading. Some of the characteristics of these learners include the fact that they're almost always less fluent readers and have sight vocabularies many thousands of words smaller than average readers. Also, they know the meanings of fewer words, have less conceptual knowledge, and are almost always less skilled in using strategy to enhance comprehension or repair it when it breaks down. Dr. Torgesen's research showed that for these students to achieve grade level standards, they must learn critical skills faster than their grade level classmates. This logic of instructional intensity points to the need for targeted, effective instruction. Unfortunately, teachers of older students have often received little or no training in teaching foundational reading skills. And additionally, many schools do not provide the amount of time needed for intervention. If there's going to be a significant shift in improving reading skills for older learners, we must do more in the early grades to prevent reading difficulties from developing, and have powerful intervention programs in place in 4th and 5th grades. Because the expectation for independent reading is so much greater beginning in 4th grade, along with the increase in volume and text complexity, middle school is often when the reading gap widens. When older students have serious reading difficulties, they will need intensive intervention. The recommended time is 90 minutes a day. And they will also need support in the content areas so that they learn essential content or they will be left further behind in this area as well. Torgesen provided the most important instructional features for interventions. And again, these are going to sound familiar because the research is consistent. First of all, interventions are most effective when they provide systematic and explicit instruction on whatever component skills are deficient: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, reading comprehension strategies. They also provide a significant increase in intensity of instruction, as we discussed. And they provide ample opportunities for guided practice of new skills, provided appropriate strategies and context, and provided appropriate levels of scaffolding and support as children learn to apply new skills. So what is explicit, sequential, and systematic instruction? It has a name today, and that's called structured literacy. This information and graphic come from the International Dyslexia Association, which promotes the type of instruction known as structured literacy. Structured literacy incorporates the three keys that we are focusing on today because the research is very clear that these are the essential components of effective teaching of reading. Explicit means that no skill or concept is assumed. The teacher clearly explains and models the skills with examples that align directly. Systematic means that there is a system of instruction that has been carefully planned, and sequential means that the system moves logically from simple skills to more complex skills. Additionally, structured literacy provides students with many opportunities for practice, with the teacher offering clear, prompt, and constructive feedback. We're going to provide a short overview of the Reading Horizons method. If you are interested in learning more and would like to receive a full demonstration of the Reading Horizons course, click Yes on the poll on your screen. As discussed earlier, research tells us that students in special education are significantly behind in reading and must gain skills quickly in order to make progress toward grade level reading. How does Reading Horizons provide structured literacy instruction and intervention that accomplishes this goal? First, by providing educators with the knowledge and tools to immediately begin addressing the areas of need. Reading Horizons believes that all teachers and paraprofessionals who will be teaching reading and working with students in intervention need to understand the science of reading and the structure of English. Unfortunately, many of us received little preparation for doing so. During one day of professional development, teachers gain an understanding of the structure of English and how to provide the three keys of direct instruction in all 5 of the components of reading, beginning with phonemic awareness. For schools who will be using the fully instructional software as well, educators have access to training and resources that enable students to receive individualized instruction customized to meet their needs. For beginning readers in kindergarten through 3rd grade, Reading Horizons Discovery provides instruction and intervention that is flexible based on the school's literacy plan. Reading Horizons is a core phonics solution in Tier 1 classrooms and provides the explicit and systematic instruction that reduces the need for intervention because students receive appropriate reading instruction right from the beginning. When additional support is needed, Reading Horizons Discovery can be used as intervention within the classroom in a station rotation or push-in model, or as differentiated small group intervention. The Discovery software provides assessments that are diagnostic and prescriptive, allowing each student to receive the type and level of instruction needed to rapidly fill gaps and connect to text. Teachers have access to a wealth of data that can be viewed by individual student, group, or entire class. It is always our recommendation for grades K to 3 that the teacher be the main provider of the instruction, either whole class or small group, whereas the software is more supplemental, providing opportunities for differentiation and additional targeted support for students as needed. For older students, targeted intervention is best accomplished using instructional software that is adaptive so that data can be used to provide the best intervention in differentiated small groups or individually. Older students tend to have far more individualized needs and gaps than younger students. So for those using the Reading Horizons Elevate program, the software tends to be the driver of the instruction. Teachers then use the data, as I mentioned, to more effectively target what they work on with students. This is flexible based on the setup of the classroom and, again, the preference of the teacher in the school. The software lessons are prescriptive based on the initial diagnostic assessment and student response within each lesson. This ensures that students are getting individualized and differentiated instruction based on what they need to ensure student success. This is particularly important for students who may also be English language learners and who have a variety of needs. The Reading Horizons instructional design is based around the daily core 4, which generally occurs during a literacy intervention block of 30 to 45 minutes. During a daily lesson, review always occurs first to measure retention of previously learned skills. When students are ready to move to a new skill, explicit instruction and modeling of the new skill comes next. Based on the gradual release of responsibility model, this is where the teacher provides clear instruction. In order for students to practice the skill, the process of dictation is essential. Dictation serves to overlap the phonological and orthographic loops so that students are applying the skill. This will be discussed more fully in just a moment. Once students have demonstrated an understanding of the concept or skill, they move to transfer. Remember that one of the essential elements of validated intervention is the connection to text. This occurs during the transfer section. Each lesson may take several days to complete as students review and apply skills in transfer activities. As I mentioned, dictation serves as an essential component of the Reading Horizons method because this multisensory process, based on Orton-Gillingham principles, incorporates hearing, speaking, writing, and reading. Language centers in the brain are activated and connected as students apply each skill, and formative assessment occurs after every dictation in order for teachers to provide support and corrective feedback. This powerful part of the method is one reason why students can rapidly improve reading. Transfer, as I mentioned, is the next most essential step. Transfer cards provide students with fluency practice and an opportunity to apply the skills just learned to reading words and sentences. Transfer cards provide an opportunity to reinforce the loops by going from visual to auditory, essentially decoding where dictation involves encoding. Little books are decodable text for K to 3 to provide the opportunity to practice the skills learned, build reading fluency and confidence, and assess comprehension. Every skill should be practiced in context to help students develop automaticity, which leads to fluent reading and allows students to pay attention to meaning so that they can comprehend the text. Comprehension is always the goal. The software provides students opportunities to transfer their skills to reading after they have received instruction and practice within the lessons. Students transfer their skills by reading controlled passages at the end of the lessons, through the vocabulary portal by building their vocabulary through activities, and by reading expository passages in the library portal. Transfer cards also provide older students with fluency practice and an opportunity to apply the skills just learned to reading words and sentences at their level. Again, it provides the opportunity to reinforce the loops by going from visual to auditory. Teachers can also provide students additional opportunities to transfer their skills through the print materials such as the student transfer cards, the student book, and the Reading Horizons Elevate Library. This is an overview of the Reading Horizons instructional method, an explicit, systematic, and sequential framework with multisensory instruction aided by a unique marking system that helps struggling readers begin to identify the patterns in English. For younger students, this begins with letter instruction. For older students, a review of the letter sounds is necessary to identify and close gaps and to address phonemic awareness issues. Next, sounds are immediately blended into a slide, called a bigram in the literature, that prevents students from isolating sounds within words and leading to greater fluency. Nonsense words are an important component in helping students to apply skills to unknown words. Then students learn 7 simple skills to accurately decode words, beginning with 5 syllable types and connecting these patterns to 2 decoding skills used to decode multisyllabic words. With these simple skills, students are able to build on the framework to include increasingly more complex skills. For beginning readers and students learning English, the Reading Horizons program begins with letter instruction. This includes the name of the letter, the sound of the letter, and upper and lower case formation. Students learn how to blend these sounds in a slide and then in real and nonsense words during the process of dictation. For older students, a review of letter sounds is critical to assess gaps in phonemic awareness and to demonstrate dictation and the marking system in simple words. You can see that the letter sequence is generally alphabetical, with a few exceptions. One of these is having the letters C and K at the end. You'll see why in a moment. Dr. Kilpatrick, who was mentioned before, makes a powerful statement about the need for this review of letters and sounds for older students. He said the biggest mistake that we make is when we think that children or adults are too old or beyond phonemic awareness. If they don't have phonemic proficiency, instant access to the phonemes in spoken words without even thinking about it, which is pretty well developed in typical readers by 3rd grade, then that is a skill that needs to be addressed, or else we have no reason to expect any substantial improvements in word level reading. Here is an example of explicit instruction with a new skill. This shows how something that may seem complex can be presented clearly and simply so that students can apply the skill immediately. So, for example, why is cat spelled with a C and kitten spelled with a K? They both have that same beginning sound, k. There is a key reason as to why C and K were saved into the last letter set. Since both letters make the same sound, how do we know which one to use? Let's look at the 2 lists of words. What do you notice? Look at the vowels that follow either the C or the K. This is a rule in the English language. K takes the vowels I and E. C takes the other 3, A, O, and U. This is why it is important that students know all of their vowels before introducing C and K so that they will know how to use them correctly in their spelling. This rule is simple but powerful and will hold true in all English-based words. And what if a word doesn't follow the rule, like kayak? Kayak comes from the Inuit language, or kangaroo. That comes from the Aboriginal language. This helps students to understand that English actually has patterns that are very predictable. But our language is made of words from many other languages like Greek or Latin, French, and German, and that helps to explain those unusual spellings and pronunciations. So, very simple for students to learn very quickly. So, once students have learned all of their consonants and vowels, they are ready to progress to combining letters that comprise blends, special vowel combinations, and digraphs. Blends are taught early in this instructional sequence because they are so prevalent in English words. Consequently, it is critical that students are able to effectively identify blends in order to accurately read, pronounce, and spell a large number of English words. So chapters 1 and 2 cover all of the foundational skills that really are the building blocks for reading. And then at the beginning of chapter 3, at this point in the program, students are introduced to the long sounds of vowels, and students move from marking words using the simple marking system to proving them. How do we know if the vowel is short or long? This provides students with the why behind how words are spelled and pronounced using those higher level reasoning skills. This simple framework is incredibly empowering for students to learn and apply the core patterns that prove words short or long within words and syllables. The framework is used to efficiently teach additional concepts. So these are the main patterns in English that prove a vowel long or short. We call them 5 phonetic skills. So you will actually get a chance to see how each of the 5 phonetic skills works during the course of a demonstration. So the 5 phonetic skills framework is used to efficiently teach additional concepts such as adding suffixes and the pronunciations of Y as a vowel. These skills also apply to the syllables of multisyllabic words. Because students are proficient in the 5 phonetic skills, they learn these additional concepts easily and apply the patterns efficiently to multisyllabic words. These skills allow students to be independent readers. They are empowered with proven strategies that increase their self-efficacy because they now have the skills that work. They see the results, and so do their teachers and administrators. Based on the data gathered from these informal and formal assessments, teachers can differentiate instruction and scaffold as needed. A differentiation table is provided at the end of each lesson in Reading Horizons Discovery, and enrichment activities are provided at the end of each lesson in Reading Horizons Elevate to give teachers direction and resources for reinforcement and differentiation. This helps us maximize success by ensuring students do not miss out on personalization of instruction and practice. Reading Horizons Accelerate is a free online tool that helps connect the software and direct instruction. The planner tool gathers student data from the software and groups students at below, on, or above level on each lesson to help teachers provide targeted, differentiated small group and one-on-one instruction and practice. A blended learning approach allows for truly targeted and differentiated instruction. The software informs direct instruction, and direct instruction can inform the software instruction and practice. How the blended approach is implemented depends on the grade level and needs of the students. Thank you for joining us for Part 1. Part 2 of this webinar will be available on November 20th and will cover how to provide modifications for reading instruction with students who have mobility issues, students on the autism spectrum, and students with dysgraphia and other special needs.
And now we're going to do a wrap up. And so as Laura mentioned before, the special needs webinar Part 2 will be coming up November 20th. You'll learn how to modify reading instruction specifically for 4 groups in special education. Here's a link. This link will be sent out in an email 24 hours after the webinar is over, so that you can sign up for the special needs webinar Part 2. If you're watching this live right now, like I just mentioned, you'll get that link by email. So feel free to, if you'd like to contact us, to contact a reading specialist or set up a demo, you can just go to readinghorizons.com. Let me just show you very quickly how to get there. So if you go to readinghorizons.com up here, and if you click right here on the menu and click on Contact Us, you can click on wherever you live, and you can see your representative and set up information to talk with a specialist or see a demo. Now we're going to go to Barb Mackey for just a very short testimonial. Barb has been teaching special education for the last 20 years. And she's going to give a testimonial of Reading Horizons just for a couple minutes.
So I'm Barb Mackey. I have been teaching special education for 22 years in the state of Missouri. The challenges I have faced as a special education teacher are students becoming frustrated to the point that they feel like failures in reading, and being able to find a curriculum that is strategy-based to help students learn and promote phonics and be able to help them decode words so they don't feel like failures when it comes to reading. So in the past, I've tried many different things. When I first started out teaching, there wasn't a whole lot of curriculum out there. So we had to create our own curriculum and find books that we could work with students, struggling readers on, that didn't look like baby books, didn't make the kids feel worse about their self-esteem than what they already did. Then of course we ended up with Basil series that promoted reading but did not promote the phonics, which they needed to learn in order to be able to decode and read, to do those things. I was introduced to Reading Horizons 5 years ago by our high school special education teacher, and was able to go through the online training and learned quite a bit, and then was able to actually go to a training with a presenter and learned even more, and have found that it is very helpful in teaching phonics. It's a very visual based approach, along with kind of all aspects. It teaches spelling and it teaches reading, and it applies those skills in situations to help make them feel successful. And as a result of that, I have had students who have gone from a Lexile of a BR to Lexiles on grade level within 1 to 2 years of being on this program. And then they're able to be dismissed from special education and placed back in the regular education classroom and be successful.
Okay, welcome back. Well, not welcome back. Welcome back to Laura, because she wasn't in front of the camera before. And thank you for sharing that with us. Again, how effective instruction works in all 3 tiers, super important, and I love to hear those success stories. So Laura and I will be answering a couple of your questions in the literally a couple of minutes we have left. So one question that we've gotten repeatedly is, can we get a copy of this training? You will receive a link within 24 hours. So you'll have online access to this all the time. You can download it, the recording, and access it as much as you want. And then also in that email, you will receive information about the part 2 of this webinar. So you'll definitely want to be sure and sign up for that. Yeah, so you will get that. Yes, you can have the recording. And then we did have a question, which is, I feel like in the short amount of time we have left, a good way to summarize this webinar today. The question is, could you reiterate what the 3 keys were for instruction? And Laura talked about this quite nicely. She set it up. And it's something that the National Reading Panel defined for us as well. So it was systematic, explicit, and sequential instruction involving phonics. And I think to add to that, I mean, systematic, we're speaking to what we've heard from our educators today as well, that it needs to be in the schools systemically. We do have success when teachers use it by themselves in their classroom, when special educators use it in their instruction, still will make a difference. But it's most impactful if you can use that in a system like an MTSS setting there. And then also explicit, and that is really clear. It's a clear definition, right? You're really clear about what we're teaching and really intentional. Anything you want to add to the explicit piece, Laura?
Just that, we don't assume that students have knowledge and skills that we haven't actually assessed. And that includes older students in particular. One of the things that Dr. Kilpatrick said is that one of the biggest mistakes we make is that we assume older students already know all those consonant and vowel sounds, when in fact they often don't. And we don't know to go back and check for that. So really important.
Yeah,
for all students, but in particular, we often neglect to do that with older students.
Yeah, I love that. It's super important. And then the last piece was that sequential, and that really, the sequence of our method is really intentional. And I think that is what makes the difference. I'll add a little bit to that to say that we really focus on teaching to mastery. We always get requests for pacing guides, and we have to reframe that a little bit, because we really want that focus to be, we're teaching to mastery, sticking to the sequence, no matter what tier or setting you're teaching it in. I am preaching to the choir, frankly, with special education teachers. You guys have that as your default, but that sequence is critical. And if you are working in a setting where in the special education setting, and you have general ed classroom teachers using this as well, be an influencer to help them understand, because sometimes the temptation is to go out of sequence or to correlate it with maybe a basal phonics sequence. Help them understand that it's really best for the student if we stick to the sequence that Reading Horizons has.
And English is a complex language, and there are lots of layers. So we start simple and move to more complex, but the order in which that happens is really important. And often we'll try to present concepts or skills to students for which they do not have the foundation, and then they are confused and they don't make progress. So there is a real necessity for that sequenced instruction.
Absolutely. And resist the urge to skip. We do know statistically, I keep repeating this because it continues to astound me. What we know about brain development for every hour that it would take a student in kindergarten through 3rd grade to receive this kind of instruction and master it, it takes 4 hours for students that are older than that. And I know that's significant, and that tries our patience, so the inclination might be to skip a few things, but really ensure that they have mastered those skills in that sequence, so that we're not causing any. So we're being most effective with our instruction.
And what we know about this type of instruction is that it's good for all students and absolutely necessary for students with print-based disabilities like dyslexia.
Yep. Absolutely. Amen. I don't know what else there is to say, right? Thank you for joining us today. Look for that email, and as ever, if you have any suggestions or other questions, feel free to contact us anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.